Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series of live careers webinars brought to you by the Hertfordshire Opportunities portal, that is HOP. You see that in the poster that's just behind me, and possibly in a moment you'll see it on our screen as well. So HOP is a portal that's designed specifically for students who go to schools and colleges in Hertfordshire or immediately around Hertfordshire, and there's a whole font of information on there for you about various careers. You can pretty much look up any career that you want to and it will give you a bit of information. It'll also tell you a lot about some of the careers and industries that are particularly important to us within the county of Hertfordshire as well. So do have a look at HOP. We will give you plenty of reminders of that as we go through. Now, the purpose of these live webinars, so there's 22 of you watching live at the moment for this session. This session is being recorded, so people will be watching it back at a later date as well. But the purpose of these live webinars is to give you the opportunity to hear directly from people who do a job or are involved in an industry at the moment that you have showed some interest in, so that you can find out directly from them about what it's actually like to do that job and what the benefits are, what the challenges are, best ways to access that industry as well. So you hear from Darren and from Aysha during this webinar, but the most important thing is that by attending live on this session, you've got the opportunity to ask questions to them as well. Now, today's session is about journalism. Now, I'm expecting that most of you that are on here at the moment, if you are budding journalists, you'll probably have lots of questions popping into your head all the time. So the way that you ask questions is you don't have to speak out loud. You can just see on the screen here, this is the HOP website. So we'd very much encourage you to go and have a look at that one. I'll keep that one up there for a few seconds. The way you ask questions on this session is on your dashboard that you've got in front of you. There will be a tab on there that says questions. So if you click on that and open that out, you can type and text in your question. That will only be visible to us on the panel, so nobody else watching will be able to see the question that you've typed in. And then I will direct it to either Darren and or Aysha, or whoever I think is in the best position to try and answer that question for you. So really do encourage you to keep those questions coming in as you think of them, and we'll make sure that we answer them as well. Just to clarify, we can't see or hear any of you that are watching this at the moment, but hopefully you can see and hear us. So nobody's identity will be known throughout this session. Our session today then is on journalism. So we are going to cover a fairly broad range across journalism, looking at broadcast journalism to written journalism and probably any other areas of journalism that you can think of. And we've got two very, very experienced and very passionate panelists with you today who could talk to you about their own specific careers, and they'll be able to help answer any questions that you've got. I should say that in the registration, we did give you the opportunity to ask or put a question in there. There's been some really good ones that have come in already, and we will definitely ask those as we go through the session today. But first of all, I'd like to introduce our panelists. So if I just tell you who they are, and then I'll ask them in turn to tell us a little bit more. So we have Aysha Iqbal, who is the director of Wizz Media, which is a training program for people that want to go into the journalism industry. Now, Aysha has 16 years of experience in journalism, and she's covered a wide variety of roles. For any of you that perhaps maybe a family that live down in the southwest of the country, you may have seen her at some point because she was a news reporter and an anchor for both ITV and BBC within their regional networks down in the southwest. So we'll hear from Aysha in a moment. You'll also hear from Darren Isted, who is the owner of a company called Digital Media. Darren also has a whole wealth of experience across a whole variety of journalism. So he was the editor of the Stevenage Comet newspaper, which some of you in the north of the county may well get or may well have read or may well have seen. Darren has also been a commentator and a reporter on Sky Sports, and is also an exam moderator for the National Council of Training of Journalists as well. So he knows what it takes to become a good journalist as well. So you've got some really, really good panelists. So please do keep your questions coming in as we go through. So let me ask both of you now just to tell us a little bit more about your career biographies and tell us where you've got to now and where it all started from. So if I could start with you, Aysha, please.
So I started my career, really, I had the opportunities when I was at university. I used to work for my university radio, Echo FM, and I also did a stint in a local community radio called SolarNet. And then, you know, that led to me to basically start my career. Sorry. Then after that, I started working for 6 months for Eastern Eye newspaper. And I did that for 6 whole months. And that led me to my first role as a reporter with the Asian Express. And I did that for 2 years before I moved into local radio, Radio Jackie, as a reporter and a broadcaster. And after a year, I moved into ITV Regions, where I worked for 2 years as a reporter and a news broadcaster, prior to moving into the BBC, where I worked for the rest of my career as a news anchor and a reporter. So that's kind of my journey in.
Good. Well, that's, yes, so very, very varied, and we'll look forward to exploring some of those in a little bit more detail later on, Aysha. Darren, tell us about your career in journalism.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's a kind of similar sort of tortuous route, and I think people do. I think one of the key things is, you know, there isn't a set path, and there isn't even a set goal that anyone should kind of have. From the point that I obviously wanted to be a journalist, and after I've left university, I did work experience, which sort of in the late 80s was really a key way to get into any kind of you know, role, and certainly in the media. So that was a work experience with the Comet, who were then based over in Hitchin, or they had offices in a few other towns in North Hertfordshire, and really did that for about sort of 6 months or so until I was really lucky. And whilst doing work experience, a role became available, and I was sort of given that role as a junior reporter. Stayed with the Comet for probably about 3 years before I then moved to become a sports editor, and that was on a group called the Herald newspapers, which are based in Hertfordshire, and which ran 6 papers throughout the whole of the county. And that was kind of where I wanted to go. I wanted to do sport, and you know, that was going to be the progression for me. I did that for the next few years, and then about 2000 moved back to the Comet newspaper, originally doing sport, and then ended up doing something which is called subbing, which is basically page design. It was a sort of way that pages were designed in newspapers, and there's still an element of that now. People still do design pages, but there is less of that. And that led very quickly to becoming an editor, and it probably took me about 9 months to be a sub and then move into being an editor role. It was quite fortunate, and people retired and left at very quick times. And yeah, so I was editor of the paper till about 2014, so 12 years of doing that role. And then since then I've left and set up 2 companies. One, Spitfire PR, which is a marketing and PR company, which a lot of people who, once they've done journalism, tend to move into that, you know, if they want to get out of journalism. And the other company is #Digital Media, which is a digital magazine publishing business, which has kind of taken advantage of the way things have gone with digital and with print at the moment. So yeah, you certainly wouldn't have plotted those moves, and I certainly would have had no indication 30 years ago that was where I was going to end up. But yeah, that's the sort of path I've taken.
Thank you, Darren. So now that you've heard from Aysha and from Darren, you've heard a little bit about their background. If you have got any questions that you want to ask them, so please do. For those of you that have just joined the webinar, if you click the questions button on your dashboard, it will open out a box, and there's a text box in there where you can type in your question. That will come through to me, and then I can direct the question to Darren or to Aysha. Well, my first question, let's go all the way back. Aysha, when did you know you wanted to pursue a career in journalism? What was the point, presumably when you were at school, when you thought, this is something I really want to do?
I think I was around 16 when I came to the conclusion that I want to work in the media, and particularly in television. That was my ultimate goal. So I think I had that clarity at that age. I think you kind of know who you are and what you're good at. And so I thought, you know what, I thought it would be an exciting, interesting, dynamic career. And then, so I knew pretty early on, and that's why I was able to decide on doing A-levels in English media and sociology, because I thought that would benefit me and give me the skills needed to move into a broadcasting and journalism career. And I then therefore went on to study at London Metropolitan, where I did communications and audiovisual production studies. So I think I was pretty clear from the outset, and that's why I was able to navigate my educational route in the right direction, because I do feel that I did study the right subjects for it. So yeah, I think it's different for different people, but for me it was from a fairly young age.
Good. Okay. And Darren, same question to you.
Yeah, I think mine was probably driven more by my love of sport. Probably from as about the age of 5 or 6, I was conspiring to make football matches with toys and commentating on them, and I always wanted to be a commentator. And I think when I was growing up, it was Barry Davis and John Motson who were the sort of famous names. So it was kind of journalism, but a different aspect of it. And I think I can recall my dad taking me to Hitchin when I was probably about 9 or 10, and letting me write a report on a game, on a midweek game in non-league, and submitting it to the Comet. And yeah, of course they never used it, but there was a love there. There was always a love of communicating, of journalism, whether it was words, whether it was actually speaking, it was just kind of communicating the story. So I think that was always the starting point for me.
Good. Okay, we've had a number of questions come in already, actually, so do keep those coming in. If I don't read them out verbatim, I will just summarise. There may be a couple that are fairly similar. But this one covers a couple of questions that have come in. You both covered a wide variety of roles within the industry, but which have you enjoyed the most and which have you enjoyed the least, and why? So, Aysha.
I think I enjoyed each of the roles that I, performed, whether it was for National Asian Paper, working in local radio, to working in television. I think for me personally, because my passion was television, I think for me that was the most exciting and the most fulfilling role, because it was me achieving a goal that I'd had and an objective that I had. Also, I found television to be really exciting. There was never a dull moment. You always had an adrenaline buzz. You're meeting new people. When you're not meeting new people, you're doing live broadcasts, or you're doing pieces to camera. So it was always so exciting and challenging and engaging and interesting. And so I found that my TV career, I think, was the most memorable for me. The least memorable, to be honest, I enjoyed all of them. Perhaps the least memorable would be when I had to go out early in my days with the Asian Express and do things like vox pops, and stopping random strangers on the streets to answer questions for you and stuff. There were things like that that weren't I wasn't that keen on, but they were all part and parcel of the job.
Yeah, definitely. And Darren, anything that's sort of your real career highlight, or anything that perhaps area that you didn't enjoy so much?
I can certainly appreciate where people want to get into broadcasting, because for me, working on commentaries for football, live commentaries, whether that's for radio or for television, there's a real buzz because it's immediate, because you're telling people what's going on. They're relying exactly on you, and it's now. And even in an age, of Twitter, of people posting things on social media, even 20 years ago or so, you were getting that information to them first. So yeah, a massive buzz to doing that. But being an editor was fantastic, because slightly slower pace, and certainly on a weekly paper as opposed to a daily, when there's a constant churn. You're really responsible for not just a team of people, but you are responsible for a whole patch, for an area, and for just getting the feel right for a newspaper, and also making sure the paper doesn't do things wrong. There's a real emphasis on doing the right thing all the time and being involved in your community. So that was a fantastic role, getting to meet so many people. But yeah, there's a longer term thing, and then there's also that just incredible buzz of broadcast.
Good. Okay. Well, I just want to wrap up a couple of questions that we've got here, because they all centre around the same theme, and it's an opportunity just to take you back again into your own career progression. So, firstly, Aysha, what was the university degree course, and which university did you go to? And then my follow-up question to that is, which Darren, you may well want to comment on as well, is which qualifications and which subjects are the most important? So thinking about A levels as well, I guess, here, to get into journalism.
Sorry, so your question to me was what university and what a university degree I did. So I went to London Guildhall, which now is London Metropolitan, and I studied communications and audiovisual production studies. That was the subject that I studied. Okay,
and then Darren, what was your course that you did?
I studied international relations at Keele University back in the sort of dim and distant past. So wasn't really the intention to follow that into journalism. So I think it kind of shows that it doesn't have to be specific. You can still get into journalism after that.
Yeah. Now, I mean, a lot of the people that will be watching this live and indeed watching back on the recording may well be at the point in the school year where they're just thinking about which A levels they should be doing next year. Now, if they really want to go into journalism, are there any subjects that you'd say they really should be considering doing, Aysha?
I think that if you're doing your A levels, there are certain subjects that will be beneficial for you. For example, studying English literature and language, government and politics, sociology. you know, all the information and knowledge that you'll gain on these subjects will be very relevant to your career in the media. So for example, you need to have very strong English spoken and written skills, which an English A-level or literature degree will provide for you. You need to be very passionate about current affairs and know about politics and current issues. So government and politics will give you that deeper insight and understanding of the subject. So, you know, also sociology for me I found to be really, really relevant, because it helps you sort of analyze society and social trends, etc. And I think all of those were very relevant to my career path, and I think they did help me when I was, you know, without realizing there were skills that I'd learned along the way that benefited me ultimately when I came to doing the job in journalism, because I was, you know, writing written copy a lot of spoken English, you know, often dealing with lots of political and current affair issues. So these are all things that I think if you do them in your A-levels, I think it can be beneficial.
Yeah. And Darren, in terms of subject choice, anything that you'd add or perhaps contradicts anything that Aysha's just said?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I just think that it's really worth making the point that there isn't a golden pathway, and as now as it was even for me, and I can remember going to my careers office, which was a very small room just full of booklets. So hopefully it's moved on slightly, but there wasn't a sort of set path. And there are also things, I think there are what you would look for in a journalist, so attributes, as opposed to sort of necessary qualifications. And I can remember vividly a booklet which I looked at in the early 80s, which sort of said, you know, journalists, what you would look for would, and I've just written it down this morning to remind me, was enthusiasm and perseverance, brackets, without being too rude. And you know what, I still think that kind of thing just holds true today. So irrespective of things like English, which I think, yeah, I think obviously you would be looking to have something like an English degree or qualification, and you know, government and politics is brilliant as well. So is history, but it's what's in that person as well. You know, what they kind of bring to the table. And I've employed people who've had archaeology degrees from Oxford, and you know, things that you wouldn't necessarily think would be immediate fits, but it's partly about the person as well. But yeah, certainly, you know, looking at things like English. And just one other thing, obviously you mentioned at the start my role as a sort of moderator with the NCTJ, and I know, Gareth, you've got details there which hopefully we can flag up later, but that's a great site as well, just to get kind of some advice about potential degree courses and suggestions that they have as well on journalism courses. So yeah, that's the NCTJ, which is obviously worth checking out.
Because they do often say that you don't have to have a degree in journalism or media to go into that industry, but I do think that a degree in journalism will equip you with the tools, resources and the knowledge to make it an easy transition for students who want to go into journalism. So I do think there are benefits to that, but if you're not sure and you're uncertain and you just want to keep your options open, then, you know, doing another degree is fine, because you can also afterwards do a diploma if you wanted to in journalism, or you can do a postgraduate in journalism to make up for perhaps not doing a journalism degree. But yeah, I think personally, yeah, journalism degree can be great, but even if you don't want to do that, any degree should be fine. It's mainly just being a graduate, because there's a lot of competition in this industry. So being a graduate will, you know, put you up there with the rest of them rather than having to compete with them.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Aysha, when we spoke earlier, you were saying about the most important thing to do is to get your first foot in the door.
Oh gosh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, tell us about how you got your first foot in the door that sort of led you working for BBC and ITV.
So originally my early foot through the door when I was still at university, and a friend of mine was also a media enthusiast, and she introduced me to a local community radio station that was on for a few months called SolarNet. So I did work there. I also worked on my university radio station as a presenter, and you know, when I was at college, I was working on the college magazine and the newsletters and things. So early on, that's what I did. And then also Eastern Eye, I worked as an entertainment reporter for Eastern Eye, but I did all of this stuff for nothing. So, you know, I pretty much did a years of work, not expecting pay, but I had a part-time job at the time. But I think it was really good that I had that, because it made it much easier for me then, because I was able to build up a CV and a profile that showed that I had been working in the media for around a year, which ultimately led to me then getting my role as a reporter with the Asian Express. So I just say, wherever you can get an opportunity to get involved in anything media related, whether at college or university, definitely do that, because it does make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, the question we had in was, what kind of work experience would you recommend, Darren? And I think Aysha just touched on the fact that, you know, a school or a college community, there's so many there's so many external communications that go out there that, I mean, volunteering to write a report on your Year 7 football team must give you some opportunities, mustn't it?
It feels to me, and I'm looking at some of the training that goes on now as well, is that there are more opportunities, I think, for someone of kind of of a younger age going up to sort of degree course, to get yourself heard because of social channels. You know, you can podcast, you can vlog, you can do all manner of different things. And I don't think those channels are really open to people 20 odd years ago. I think in those days, you know, you really had to go to established organisations. You had to go to the BBC or your local paper and look for a sort of, you know, work experience role. So I think, you know, if you use your bit of common sense and get out there with the enthusiasm, yeah, I think there are so many more things you can do. As I say, I kind of bashed the door down in the end. I had to go and get a job, and I remember I applied for 30 different newspapers, and I kept the letters for quite a few years. I had 28 rejections, and then one was from the Comet, which offered a job, and one was from a paper in North Devon, where the sports pages were all about sheepdog trials. So I ended up opting to stay close to home. But yeah, you just have to keep trying and trying. But now, obviously, as I say, there are so many options to show people how good you are and what skills you've got.
Sorry, I think I didn't mention. So for young people, I think, who want to start out in the media, I think they should focus on getting up to a year's experience at least, whether that's at community, internet or hospital radio, or for a free newspaper. I think that is really imperative, so that they can then go on to getting paid work.
Yeah, Darren, I mean, you probably know the landscape in Hertfordshire, you know, a little better living here. Are there hospital radio stations in the county? What are the other sort of local community opportunities that might be available?
Yeah, I mean, from what I can sort of see in the landscape in Stevenage, and I certainly know there's a North Herts radio station which broadcasts out of Stevenage. There's a station called SG1 Radio. So there are varied independent digital only radio stations. There's quite a sort of proliferation of those. So for people interested in, you know, in broadcast, but also in journalism, in writing the stories, in writing the sort of the bulletins that go on there, because obviously those are still skills that are transferable. You know, those are people that you can contact as much as you would contact a local newspaper as well. So I think there are opportunities out there, but I really wouldn't sort of shy away from what you do yourself. If you think you know what makes a good story, go out and do that story, broadcast that on your own channels, and get in touch with the local paper. You know, the papers now, I mean, at the moment the reporters are actually based from home, and I don't really see how they may necessarily be going back to full offices in the near future at all. So it's quite tough for them to collate all the information. If you've got a great story, if you come across something that someone tells you, they'd love to hear from you. And even if it's a byline, which, well, it will be, you won't be paid, I don't think, but if you can get a byline in the local paper, it's great for your confidence, and it's also something to put in the cuttings book.
I agree with Darren in the sense that you shouldn't just rely on getting sort of your experience in, you know, local community or internet radio, but you should also be self-starting. Nowadays, young people have immense opportunity to create their own vlogs, their own blogs, their own podcasts, and these can be specifically tailored around the passion that they have or the kind of issues that they're passionate about and they want to go into a reporting career for. So that would be fantastic if they've shown that they've been proactive and that they've, you know, self-started their work as well as the traditional route of getting your experience. And, you know, for example, having your own website, having a blog on that, having a podcast on that, having a blog on that. For example, maybe you're passionate about social issues. Why not start doing that so that you have material that you can then show potential employers, which is very impressive if you've done that yourself and you've self-started.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's something that all good reporters and journalists have in common, that they have a real passion for something, whether it's sport, whether it's social issues, that they've got a passion for it, and I guess they want to tell a story, don't they, Darren?
Yeah, and that's it doesn't matter what the passion is, it really can be absolutely everything. I know if you love your sport, then you're going to try and go down that road, whether it's sports writing or sports broadcasting, and if it's politics, then obviously that way as well. But you just need to show people, and I can't reiterate this point enough, that you know how to tell a story. You know what a story is, first of all, which is key, and which is amazing how people don't know what a story is. But you know how to what the story is, and then B, that you can actually tell that story. And as kind of Aysha said, it's fine when you go for an interview and you possibly you're lucky enough to get one, but don't think that the editor or whoever it is actually just interviewing 5 people at random. They will be looking at what you can do, and they won't find that out at the interview. They'll be looking at your work, they'll be looking at what you've broadcasted, what you've written, and if you can get some examples, then that's absolutely priceless. Put that in your armory for when you come to go for a job.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
No, it's good advice. A question that's come in, this is very specific. Hi, I'm 16 and have applied to be a presenter on local radio. Are there any tips you have to get noticed by my interviewer that could potentially help me get the job? Darren, do you want to first go at that one?
Is that hospital radio, was it? Sorry, which radio?
It says local radio. Okay.
Just be passionate about what you're going to be presenting. I think showing that you're passionate about it, that you're able to get stories that you want to get. I think just showing your best attributes.
Yeah. Anything you'd add to that, Darren?
Yeah, I just had, obviously there is an art form to the interview as well. So, I've had a couple of people, I'm going to just show you, stand there like that and interview with your arms folded, and it is, make sure everything's right, the posture's right, the body language is right, and irrespective of what you've got to offer, you go in there, as you say, and as Aysha said, with the enthusiasm, and everything's good. But and be confident, and also try in the nicest possible way. And I don't quite know, I don't have necessarily advice on how you would do that, but you've got to be memorable along with all of your work that you've had. It's when you leave the room or when they're discussing, the people that they've seen, that, oh yeah, that I remember him or her or that person because of something, and it's something you've said or done or that you've presented to them. And if you're memorable, then obviously, well, as long as it's for the right reasons, you've got a good chance.
And I think go over your job description, have the passion to, not just pursue the job description, but to do more than you're expected to show. And, if there's particular areas that you want to also move into, start showing that you can start working and producing some work in those areas so that you can show that you can do other things as well.
Yeah, I was going to just add, we could go on forever with these. I'll say one more is that you would often expect someone, and perhaps one of the questions, because questions in interviews can be quite formulaic, and I know we through sort of HR, I don't want to give anything away, but HR departments insist that questions are the same for everyone. It's not going to be necessarily different, but you would always look for someone to have understood and listened to your content or read your paper or listened to a broadcast in the last week. So just check out whatever it is. If it's a newspaper or a radio station, check out what their content is, what their output is, and have a suggestion on it, and possibly something that you could improve. I heard this on Thursday, and perhaps you could have done that slightly differently. And I think people always like that kind of feedback as well, and it shows that you've either got ideas and B, you've listened to them or read the paper.
Yeah. Right, a couple more questions here just about routes into it, and then a lot of the other questions that have come in. I can tell this is a group of journalists, the potential journalists watching this, because of the quality of questions that have come in. But firstly, you're in trouble there. There are going to be a lot of questions about your own personal experiences, which will be great fun when we come on to those. Hi, is an apprenticeship or going to university best for a career in journalism? Darren, what are the apprenticeship opportunities in journalism?
Yeah, there are a number of opportunities, and as I say, we've got details which hopefully can be flashed up in the end, which have come through the NCTJ, and they've set up a new scheme. So there is an apprenticeship scheme, which I think was signed off only recently. It's not to say that that is the approved route, but I think it's given an option, and I think it also, for some people, and it's not just journalism. I mean, I deal with sort of magazines for all kinds of industries, and for some people, apprenticeships suit them better as a person than would do going to university and having a kind of 3-year, 4-year, learning period. So I think it's all about the individual. So I certainly wouldn't specify, but I will just, if I can just reach across and show, there is a booklet as well, and a link will be coming out, and that's something which has come out, and apprenticeships are discussed in this. This was out from the NCTJ. There is a PDF version, so you'll be able to get that afterwards as well, and just click and read that. But yeah, that gives some of the advice on those options.
Thank you. Yeah, and as you've alluded to, Darren, we will display the websites that you're talking about towards the end of the session, so everyone can access them and get onto them. Another question: I chose business, economics, and English literature and politics, blimey, but I want to go into sports journalism. Can I still get into sports journalism, Darren?
Yeah, of course you can. You could have done chemistry and physics and applied mathematics, and I'd be really impressed. And I'd still hope to see you, if you want to be a sports journalist, do sports journalism. I think what we're trying to say is there's probably things that would make it helpful, would make it easier, but there's certainly nothing to stop you, following any kind of path in journalism. And everything that you've mentioned there can only go to obviously make you potentially a more rounded person. If you know what a story is and you can write that story, write the bulletins, broadcast them well, then that's perfect, no matter what the qualifications that you've done.
Yeah, I mean, at what point would someone, the guys at the top of the game, so we're talking sports journalists, if I'm saying someone like Henry Winter, for example, at what point would they have decided that my specialism is going to be sports, so perhaps I'm going to move away from that more general and broader sphere of journalism to go right to the top, Darren? At what point do you need to choose that specialism?
I don't think there's a specific need to, as soon as you can, just means that you can do it more quickly. If you want to get into politics, and you're 22, then you can get into politics when you're 23 or 22 and a half. If you're 30 and you're now thinking about it, it's just delaying the inevitable. But I didn't want to do, I had no intention of broadcasting whatsoever. And I was a journalist, and I was covering a rugby match in the mid-90s, and at half-time the Tannoy announcer asked for it was the Three Counties radio correspondent who they mentioned by name over the Tannoy, who I knew wasn't there. So I went to the clubhouse and just said, look, this person's not there, tell them. And they ended up phoning me and said, can I do the broadcast? So it started from there, and it, I kind of went from that point, but I would never even considered that. So, as soon as you can, do it. These things can suddenly fall to you by chance as well.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, question for Aysha here. What would you say are the most important attributes of your personality to be a successful journalist and broadcaster?
I think the first one is to have really good interpersonal skills and communication abilities. I also think you really need to have a healthy level of confidence, so that you can, but not to be overconfident. Some young people can get a bit overconfident. I think you need to have a healthy level of confidence. So yeah, good communication skills, a healthy level of confidence. I think you need to be emotionally, I think you need to be quite determined, quite resilient as a person. You need to be proactive, because a lot of opportunities that you'll find in the media in your future career will be through you being proactive and approaching people directly, and not necessarily just going through the route of job descriptions or applying for jobs. I think communications, confidence, being proactive, determination, and being resilient, because you're going to get a lot of knockbacks along the way, and you shouldn't take that personally. I just think, the law of averages, if you start applying for enough jobs and you've got the right skill set and you've got the abilities, it's just a matter of time before you get the role that you're looking for.
Yeah. Question that's coming. I'm going to reword this slightly, because I think we've already discussed that any A level that you do is going to be of some use. The question was, would history be a good subject to take for A level? So, Darren, the question I'm going to ask you is, why would history be a good A level for someone to take? What the sort of transferable skills that you might need?
I took history, so
yeah.
I think history for me was good, because I love history anyway. I think it gives you a perspective on things that have happened. So many's the time, I've covered a story, and the knowledge that I've gained, and we did 20th century history, so the knowledge that I've gained through the history that I've studied, and I studied it at a degree level as well, was actually just purely helped in the story, no matter what. Obviously, there's a lot of essay writing. It's one of those subjects where there's a lot of writing involved as well. So you're constantly honing your writing style. So I certainly like history, and if someone's got history, they present themselves, for an interview, then yeah, okay, I'll be naughty and say that's probably a positive. I'll give that a sneaky positive, because yeah, it's that kind of a subject.
I think in practical skills, it would be good for young people, even while they're in education, to try to spend a little bit of time, learning how to master editing skills, maybe attending a filmmaking course, because these are skills that will be very necessary whether you're working in a radio station or whether you're working in a newsroom. So I think it's about, you do need to have those also under your belt.
Yeah, for sure. If you're applying to do journalism at university, what are good activities to take part in whilst at sixth form? And another question is, what should I do to better myself for a career in sports journalism? I'm going to kind of merge them into one, and just, I think we've perhaps already touched on this, but yeah.
So the first one was what?
What are good activities to take part in whilst at sixth form?
Yeah. I think if you want to take part in activities that are going to be helping you in your media career, I would do something like, for example, as I mentioned, I would join something like Toastmasters, so that you can build your speaking skills and your public speaking skills. That's one of the main things that I think would be really, really good to do. Also, working on your interpersonal skills and your communication skills. You can set yourself challenges, which will allow you to push yourself further, so that you feel comfortable communicating with people from all walks of life. And also, working on your writing skills as well. Maybe, start writing a blog so that you're very comfortable with your English written skills, because when you go into broadcasting, that is going to be one of the major things that you're going to be having to do. And if you could set up your own podcast or your own vlog, it'll be a great way for you to start building your broadcasting skills and your presenting skills. So that would all go down really well on your CV.
Yep. In fact, there's a question that came in just as you gave. It's almost as if you saw the question, Aysha. But which platforms do you suggest is the best for writing articles or blogs?
The best one for writing blogs nowadays, I think there's quite a few sites out there. I think Simple Site is quite good for writing blogs, as far as I'm aware of. I'm not too sure about other ones at the moment. Darren?
I think there's a variety that you could use. So yeah, I wouldn't be specific and choose certainly one. But I just think doing it, getting out there. I think you were just going to ask about the sort of the sport, though it can be with anything else. It's almost like read around the subject. If you've got an interest in politics or you've got an interest in sport, look at what the top sports writers, the top sports broadcasters do. Look at their output. Look at the way they say things, and how they do them. And one of the things we used to do, I think it was a long time ago now, we were employing people during the World Cup in about the mid-90s, I think, and we used to ask people as an interview question just to give us 180 words on a game that was played last night. So everyone had seen it, everyone knew what happened, and they had to write a quick resume of it, and do what sports reporters do. On the whistle, you should have a report that has been finished. So write a report during a game, and you can be looking at it live on Sky, and then get it finished virtually at the point at which the referee finishes the game. So these are things that sports reporters are doing at that time anyway. So just to see what they're doing, copy their output.
Yep. Okay. Darren, question specifically for you here. There's so many more questions that have come in. I want to make sure we get through them all. Yeah. Darren, how did you work your way up into Sky Sports football commentary?
It came from working with Three Counties Radio, so doing football in Three Counties. That was mainly Stevenage Football Club, and I wrote a letter. Actually, the good old days of, I think it was pre-email time, but I wrote a letter to Sky, and it was basically responded by someone there who said that they'd actually, I think someone had lived locally, so they'd heard my commentaries on Three Counties and intended to get in touch with me. But it was basically me contacting them, and they gave me a trial and put me on on the Jeff Stelling show, but sent me to somewhere like Halifax or Kidderminster and started at the very bottom. But yeah, and it's contact. But the point is, and I think it's still the same now. It's going out and contacting that organisation, and expecting the answer no, and then being really pleased when they say yes.
Yeah. What would you say is better media to work in, radio or TV, Aysha?
For me personally, I enjoy television more than I did radio. I just found it to be a really engaging industry where there was, because I was a news broadcaster, one of their main news broadcasters, but I also did reporting. So I found it, for me, was a really exciting and challenging career. One day I'd be, presenting the lunchtime news. The next day I would be out reporting on location. And a week later I'd be on a production shift, putting together, a news bulletin, and then having to go into the gallery to execute that. So, I found it to be very varied. It was very challenging at times, but it's very varied, and it was very exciting, and there was always so much happening. I don't think I ever had one day where I felt bored in a newsroom. It was just, it's just such a busy, fun place. But with fun comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of seriousness as well, in terms of what you're putting out there and the responsibilities you have for putting together quality reports and quality stories. But I think I enjoyed, the diversity of opportunities to report and present in television. So for me, that's good. And also most of my career was in TV. So, I spent most of my career in that. So it must have been what I found the most engaging and interesting.
Yeah, Darren, I know you feel a real affinity towards radio, don't you? So is that quite a straightforward answer for you?
Yeah, obviously my background, is kind of in print, is in writing, and then the radio sort of was an offshoot of that. And although the television was broadcast, it was almost more like radio. So unlike Aysha, I've not really experienced the full gamut of television. But what kind of a point that would come from this is that people may want to do television now. That just their life is set on television, or they may be set on working for the Times and writing now. But things, you can do different things within your sort of chosen path as well. So don't don't rule out the fact that you may want to get into television, and actually the writing side of things just suddenly becomes what you love. And also, you start off as someone who writes stories, and then wow, I want to become a broadcaster. And I've had members of staff who've gone on to work on television and in radio, and who've never, when they joined me, unless they were lying, which of course they could have done, but they show no inclination and no interest in in wanting to go and work in those mediums. So it's brilliant to see them go off and work on the national sort of television.
Sure. There's a question here that what does a typical day involve for a journalist? And we're going to wrap that with a second question that's come in here for Aysha. Thinking about your days as a news reporter for the local television stations, what's the range of topics that you've reported on? So what's perhaps the most bizarre story that you've reported on? And I'm thinking of the story you told us yesterday about the your near-death experience with a whale.
Yeah, so a typical day as a journalist, would you say, firstly?
Yeah.
So a typical day as a journalist is really, firstly, in television, we would have the morning meeting, and all the reporters and correspondents would be assigned a particular story for the day. Then I would go off when I was working as a reporter, and I would be setting up that story and then heading out with the cameraman to get the pictures and the filming done, often having to rush back to the lunchtime bulletin, and then get everything edited, and then it would go out also in the evening bulletin. So it was a very busy day. It was just full of, you had your meetings, you had your assigned tasks, and then you just really had to get on with it and get back. And the evening bulletin was your result, which was a 1 or 2 minute report that made an impact, hopefully, on people. One of the stories that I don't forget about, I've had quite a few stories and experiences while I was in broadcasters journalism, and I just say that if you're moving to a new area and you're from an urban area like London, you really need to become familiar with with country life and coastal life. And so one day I had to go out on a story because there'd been a whale that had flushed, had been brought up to the shore at Perranporth Beach. And so I was with the cameraman, and we didn't know where this beach was, but we knew that ITV were also pursuing the story. So we decided that it would be best if the cameraman went in his direction and I followed my direction, and then we'd mobile each other. But I obviously recklessly ignored a danger warning sign. I didn't even see it until I'd gone past. And then while I was walking, all of a sudden I felt just the water, the tide came in really, really ferociously. It was literally so far out, and it just came in and it swamped me over my head. Literally, I went underwater. It was just, oh, I was just in shock. And I lost my bag, came off, my shoes came off, my mobile got damaged, and I was under the water for a while as well. And during that time, I didn't know what to do. I just prayed, and sounds like some kind of Noah's situation, but the waters kind of went back. They did sort of suddenly start, going back into the sea, and I managed to survive that. And I really do think that if it had been any worse, I could potentially have lost my life in that. But then anyway, I had to then still, even though I was drenched and traumatized, I still had to keep running to find the story. And I got there, and ITV were already there, but we managed to still get the story for the newsroom. That dear lamb, that dear whale that had washed ashore.
Darren, any sort of anecdotes you can remember? Any really random stories that you've ever been asked to cover?
Probably not particularly as dramatic as that. Certainly, no, at the very beginning of my career, I was asked by an editor. He asked who wouldn't want to go and cover a story about devil dogs. I think it was the time when Rottweilers were going mad, and they were going to be licensed, etc. And obviously, I put my hand up because I'm not really a great fan of. I wasn't at the time. So he then decided, and he wouldn't be able to do this nowadays, obviously. But he thought, right, that'd be great if I was the one who went out and covered the devil dog story. So I interviewed a breeder in Hitchin, and there was a great front page picture with a dog that was taller than I was, hugging me, and a massive Rottweiler. It was the most horrible thing to do, if that's a fear. And also working with Three Counties Radio, I was it's kind of infamously now thrown out of a football ground by the chairman down in Welling, at Welling United, for various reasons, and it ended up making the national newspapers that weekend as well. But I'll try and draw a veil over that particular story.
There's two other stories that I always remember and never forget. It was when I was at the Asian Express. I broke a few exclusive stories, and one of them was I had an interview with a British Asian music icon, and I think he was a bit drunk at the time, but he's just said everything to me about how basically the Asian music labels treat Asian music artists like dogs. And that was the first page of our Asian Express paper, and I just, I was told, because Movie Muggles, the ones who are behind, who did all the music industry from behind, I was told that they were really, really annoyed, and I should be careful, because they were known to be notorious gangsters. So that was one story. And also I did a story on the Free Justice campaign. There were a lot of, when the riots took place in Bradford and Burnley a number of years ago, a lot of the young people had been imprisoned, and those who had just literally thrown a few stones at the scene, but they were getting the same kind of sentences that those who were a lot more actively involved in the riots had. And so I did a story on that. I didn't expect the response, but the story got picked up by the Guardian newspaper and other papers, and the Asian Express sold out for that week, and it ultimately resulted in a number of the young people getting their prison sentences reduced, because their cases had to go back into court. So that was a really great story to cover, because I felt I'd actually made a difference. And they're often the stories that are the most fulfilling, are the ones where you actually feel you have had a positive impact on people's lives.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's an interesting area that you brought up there. And one of the questions that got submitted to us prior to the webinar was, what are the steps that you take? And I say you, I'm going to say you as the industry here, but perhaps you've got some personal examples of this. What are the steps you take to fact check info that you include?
Okay. All the information that we do gather, whether it was in broadcast journalism or print journalism, we would just be, we'd ensure that any information that we got came from verified sources. And we would check up on these thoroughly. So we would never just print any kind of information that we heard. We'd need to see that the source was reputable from where it came from. So we'd have to do some research into that prior, of course, because otherwise, you can get lots of stories coming to you, but you need to make sure that they're real, they're genuine, and they're authentic. That takes a bit of research along the way. Yeah,
Darren, from a sports side, I mean, those of you that watch Sky Sports News quite regularly, particularly around transfer deadline day, we're full of breaking news stories about someone said this or this is going to happen. But what's the process around fact checking information?
Well, I mean, if you mention Sky, then I think the official motto is never wrong for long. So it's always it's always updated and changed. Do you know what? I think it's quite an important subject, and it's become prevalent at the moment. And I think people sort of mock Trump for the fake news mantra, which has been going on for quite a long time. But I do think, you go back into the media, you can go back however many years you want, even centuries. I think a lot of stuff has been published, was published, potentially may still be published. That's dubious, that has got, it's not necessarily the truth. And I always think when you look at your journalism, and you can hope that you are publishing the truth, but you can never be sure. You can always fact check, you can always check your sources, you've got impeccable sources. Unless you've seen that particular thing that you're reporting on, or for sure, then you are kind of relying to a certain degree on sort of support from outside, if you like. But yeah, you do everything you can, and I think that the simple mantra is that there are two sides to every story. And I've had journalists who regularly, when we would come to you with a fantastic story, an absolutely brilliant tale, and then you go, oh, this is great, and what did the council say, the other part of the story, or the police? And it's like, oh, I haven't got hold of them yet. And well, it's not a story yet, it's what one party has told you. So yeah, you've always got to verify.
Yeah, for sure. Right, a few more questions to get through. So many good questions, and I want to cover all of them. Do you think things such as prejudice often get in the way of chances of being hired? I don't know who wants to fill that one first, but that's a
prejudice in terms, a lot of people do say, oh, there's prejudice in terms of, ethnic minorities and BAME communities to working in the media. To be honest, I've never had that issue in terms of, feeling that I'm racially discriminated against. I don't have that kind of thing. It's not the way I operate. I'm sure that when I went into my career to start with, I'm sure the fact that I was an Asian person was actually a positive thing for me, because all the news outlets are looking to hire a variety of different nationalities, etc. So for me, I always looked at it as a benefit. I thought, well, that's great if that's what they need, but obviously you have to have the abilities and the skill set to perform the role. So you don't just get in there on those grounds of colour. You have to, you can be a minority, but you have to ensure that you can also fulfil the role effectively. But to me, it didn't bother me at all. I always looked at it as a plus point because I'm an optimist. So
yeah. Well, what about from an industry perspective, Darren?
You would certainly hope not. But I mean, in terms of different groups, racially, I really would. It's the kind of thing you would hope that there isn't going to be that kind of a case. That would be difficult to tell, but it could well be. I mean, certainly in terms of gender, I think there's quite a good split, sort of male, female, in the various industries. But it's still more can be done. But I think that's certainly changing. Even in terms of disability, I know quite a few people who are working in the various industries with various disabilities who are quite prominent as well. I think certainly more than you would say sort of 30 odd years ago, when there probably was inequality across a whole range of sort of markers that you would peg that on.
Yeah, good. Right, we've got somebody looking for some tips, really. I think both of you will be very well positioned to answer this one. I'd like to strive for a career in broadcast journalism. However, sometimes I can feel nervous when public speaking. Do you have any tips to improve confidence and to stay calm and collected when reporting a story? Well, Aysha, if you were able to report a story after nearly being washed ashore, you obviously kept your composure there. But what would your tips be?
In terms of how to be to build your communication skills?
Yeah, around public speaking. I mean, there's a lot of people.
I would say that you do definitely need to work on that if you have a concern about that. But there are a lot of groups in every area, such as Toastmasters, public speaking groups, where you can go on a weekly basis and have to deliver 20 to 30-minute public speaking speeches. And I think that if you do that on an ongoing basis, your confidence would build, and that's a transitional skill that you would take into a broadcasting role, because you will be doing pieces to camera, you'll be doing interviews with people, for example. But to actually, I think, do definitely work on it. Set yourself goals. Look at where you are at the moment and what you want to achieve. So if you don't feel your confidence is at a high level, have a goal of how you'd like to communicate. Perhaps you could have a role model, and you could work towards that by setting yourself tasks, but by also going out there and joining organisations that will help you to improve your public speaking and your confidence. Because once you can communicate effectively, I think then the confidence comes with it naturally. So I would definitely say, and also if you want to boost your skill set, maybe join a drama class. That will push you to your limits. That will test you in uncomfortable situations. And if you can do that, then that's also going to be beneficial both for communication and for other skills as well. So I would say go out there, look out the organisations that are offering public speaking skills such as Toastmasters or other ones, and definitely start building on those areas because they're going to be really important in the future.
Yeah. I mean, how did you feel, Aysha, the first time that you sat in front of a camera, knowing that you were speaking live to probably hundreds of thousands of people? Could you differentiate that between perhaps presenting to your team or you had such a mass audience watching you? How did you cope with that?
Yeah, do you know, I never felt uncomfortable in front of the camera. That's something I had from childhood. Maybe I was a bit of a performer. It never daunted me. I actually enjoyed the camera being on me. So for me, I didn't find it to be challenges. And also, when you were broadcasting, you didn't see who you were broadcasting to. You're just really looking into the auto cue and presenting. So you can actually disconnect from the fact that there are probably millions of people who are watching, even though they are. So it's something that I think all presenters do when they're presenting the news bulletins. They're just focused on, reading the auto cue correctly, having the right intonation and the presentation style. And I think that's mainly the way to do it.
Okay. Has it ever been very hard to remain impartial when reporting on stories? Darren, have you ever had to report on your own football team live on Sky Sports? Because that must be quite challenging.
Well, all the time when it comes to local newspapers, and I do remember getting a letter which I ended up publishing in one paper for a really scathing report. I think they lost 4-1 at Dover, and they were terrible. And we said they were terrible, and then someone said I should be supporting the team. So yeah, it can be difficult, but it's a very important issue. It's a good question, and you should remain impartial. I think you really should. It should be a watchword for all reporters. To do that when they're kind of doing the story, finding out all of the sources. Obviously we had campaigns on various issues, and I think when you run a campaign, when you've got an end goal in sight, then that's slightly different. And I think you do sometimes there are things that you won't publish because you want to get that result, but otherwise, yeah. And I hear stories of people that don't like reporters that don't like certain political persuasions, and it clouds the way they report news stories, and that's just not right. You call it as it is. You present the story to the reader, and then it's up to the reader who's who's got their partialities, who's got their biases. They will put those into them themselves. It's not for you to do.
Yeah, good. No, thank you. Good answer. Right, 4 more questions on the screen. We'll get through these as quickly as we can, because we're rapidly approaching an hour. There's been so many good questions that have come in. What experience would you need in travel journalism? Darren?
I think if you've got a bus pass, that'll be great. Do you know what? Again, I just think it's the same. Certainly in terms of the skills, in terms of the writing, it's more of a feature style. So I think you've got to be writing slightly longer. It's slightly more in depth, actually looking into cultures and where you're going. Obviously a sort of global knowledge. So understanding of that, but also historically of issues, of things that have taken place. So I don't think there's anything specific, but I think certainly travel writing does tend to be it's a longer read. It's not sort of a snappy news bulletin type thing whereby you're summing up something very quickly. I think you've got a little bit more space to be able to breathe and to write something which is a bit longer.
Yeah, good. Aysha, for someone in their second year of A-levels, so therefore going to be finishing school next summer presumably, and considering taking a gap year next year, what would you suggest to do to gain experience and widen my skill set in broadcasting and presenting? We probably alluded to this earlier, but
I think if you're taking a year out, I think that can be fantastic. And I think you could start looking at, I would say, start exploring opportunities that are available in in community radio, in internet radio and hospital radio. If you can start working on any of these areas, and you can even do it on a part-time basis once a week, you know, over a year you've built up a year's experience for your CV. So I would say definitely just get involved wherever you can in any media opportunities that are available. Although you're still a student, it doesn't matter. You can still be, you know, you can. I mean, I was 16 when I was working for Solo Net Radio, and when I was, you know, I think I was about 18 when I did a stint on the Pakistani channel. And you know, so even though I was young and I hadn't fully completed my degree or anything, I think if you are passionate about it and you pursue it and you put in the effort and you find the right contacts, you can, you know, get the experience that you want, and that will be fantastic for you later on in your career. If you, whether you do A-levels or not, just having the work experience on your profile will be great.
Yep, good. Two final questions then. Is social media a good way to gain experience? I mean, that's brought a whole new dimension of writing in, isn't it? For those people who effectively tweet, trying to get something into what 280 characters is a literary art form in itself, Darren. So how can social media help people?
Do you know what? I think it could, one of the key ways it can help is by seeing what not to write when certain people put things on social media and Twitter and anything else. So you know, it's not very long. You know, I think you do have to do a great job to actually catch the attention, but there are so many bad examples out there as well. So I do think it's worth you know, making sure you don't fall into those traps. The other thing you would do, obviously, is whatever your sort of chosen field, if there is a sort of, you know, the person who was talking about travel, for instance, or if you're talking about sport, go and follow, you know, Simon Calder, go and follow people who do the travel, go and follow your Henley Winters, see what they're actually posting about on social media, see how they do it, and then where the links go to as well. Read their copy, read their features, and just get a kind of understanding of what they're doing. So I think, to me, social media, you know, and I find it, I've got my own sort of various interests and hobbies, and I'll follow certain accounts, but it's a gateway. That's not the end point. That becomes a gateway to, you know, what these people are writing in a slightly longer form. So just follow them and follow what they write.
Yeah, that's, I mean, Aysha, I guess even Instagram, which is largely it's images, you can use that well to tell a story, can't you? So there must be some transferable skills gained from using social media effectively within journalism.
Yeah, and also there is, because from when I was working in a multimedia newsroom at the BBC, we had radio and we had online as well. So we were having to not just, you know, we were often having to talk to the online team so that some of our stories that were being reported could also go online. And then we were also, you know, also now newsrooms are a lot more savvy about using social media. So they'll be scouring Twitter, Instagram, Facebook to see if they can find potential stories for their newsroom. So yeah, social media skills are very transferable to a newsroom, especially today, because it's all very multi-skilled and it's also very multimedia, because, you know, TV can't just stay traditional. It has to adapt to the times, and so the channels are adapting to the times, and they are incorporating all these things now. So yeah, if you want to improve your social media skills, that's great, and mention that in your interview, and I'm sure that will go down well, because it is an area that it's a lot of trial and error, because there will, you know, a lot of newsrooms having to compete with all the new technology, but it's definitely something that is used frequently.
Yeah, in fact, that's a really good segue into our final question, which I want you both to answer. So where do you see journalism going in the future? That was a really, really good question, the person who sent that one in. I've held it till the end. But yeah, Aysha, what is the future of journalism?
I think journalism is going to just become a lot more multimedia. That's what I think. I think television stations aren't going to be operating on their own. They're going to have their connections with the online media in their organization. They're going to be connecting to, they're just going to be connecting to they'll be connecting to online resources. They'll be connecting to radio. It's all becoming very merged. There's no distinct boundaries anymore. Even in the way the BBC regions are set up, you've got the online people sitting opposite the TV crew, and you've got the radio on the other side. So I think that I think the future is very much going to be multimedia, as opposed to how it has been in the past, where where it's just very traditional media. And I think there's also another move where, because people are becoming more empowered, they're more in touch with journalists and producers, there's a lot more external input from outsiders that is going to be taken more seriously. So a lot of people have, like, video cams, and and they often send into TV stations recordings of a potential story that they found, or issues that they've covered, and we do feed off of that, and often take footage that's been filmed by non-journalists.
Yeah, and then Darren, I mean, just your take on that, but let's just wrap it around the angle of just reassuring everyone that's watching at the moment that there are plenty of opportunities going to be available now and in the future for this next generation of journalists to come through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. I mean, I think it's fragmented, as Aysha said. The whole landscape is fragmenting, but if you look at it individually, the outlook, I think, is still good for television. I think the outlook is still good for radio. I think social media and those kind of platforms, they're only going to improve. I think print is the one sector that is struggling greatly, has been struggling in reality for about the last 15 years, and I think is going downhill. But I think that's going to be replaced by digital sort of output. When I left in about 6 years' time, I sort of predicted when I left the newspapers that storytellers, the basic level, ground level journalists, trainee journalists, the people who are just starting, those people won't ever, they'll always be required, they won't ever go. And 6 years later, I think they're even more important. So I just say, if you've got a career, you want a career in broadcasting or TV or in print or in any kind of media, there's always going to be a need for storytellers. And I think because it's kind of expanded in the different ways that you can do that, I think there's an even greater need. So don't feel like this is a dying industry. I think it's an expanding industry, and go for it. Go for it, whichever way you want to do it.
Good. That's a really positive and upbeat message to finish on. Now, we've referenced a few times during the webinar a couple of websites that we think you should be aware of. So Darren mentioned the NCTJ websites. That's the National Council of Training for Journalists. Hopefully we'll just show you on a screen share in a moment access to that site so that you can find that. In fact, there it is there. So the second and the third ones on there are two that Darren told us about beforehand. So if you click on those ones or make a note of this, remember this session is being recorded, so if you don't get it now, maybe take a picture of it now if you really want it, but it will be available tomorrow. The top address on there is wizzmedia.co.uk. So Aysha, this is your company, so just tell the people watching, and particularly if there's any teachers that are watching this as well, or anyone from schools wondering how they can get their students better equipped for a career in journalism, just tell us what Wizz Media does.
So Wizz Media is a media training and filming company. The training element is I train in media interview skills, how to generate your own in-house PR, and also media careers, which is currently relevant here. So the media careers is really a one-stop shop for all media students and media enthusiasts who want to work in the media industry. And I cover basically all the areas that I felt I would have benefited from if I'd learned early on in my career, but these are things that I learned along the way in my career. So it covers things like, showing young people what to expect for a career in the media industry in terms of salary expectations, working hours, and job descriptions, so that they can have a very clear insight and make an informed decision. We also talk about the personal, practical, and emotional skills that will help young people to have a head start in the industry. So, for example, editing skills, just editing, writing skills, just a various number of things that they can learn that will definitely help them move on into the industry. And we also give them insight into some of the most invaluable resources, such as websites, also networking associations like the International Royal Television Society, the Press Club. And these welcome people who are interested in journalism, and there doesn't have to be an age limit on that. Also, this is one of many things that I cover in the workshop. It's also focused on helping young people achieve a 5-year plan. I work with them on them achieving a 5-year plan of how they plan to get to their ultimate media goal. So that would start perhaps with working for free, building up a profile, and then how they're going to move to the next role, and further on until they reach their ultimate destination. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that I cover, but there's a lot more as well.
Fantastic. Well, look, between those sites there that we're giving you details of, do have a look at them. It's really something worth following up on. Let's just conclude then by thanking everyone who's watching this live at the moment and has submitted some really fabulous questions. So thank you for submitting those. And then also thank you so much to Darren and of course to Aysha for joining us and sharing their experience and their knowledge with us this afternoon. So we hope this has really informed you on the next steps that you might want to take. It's given you some really good tips for your future pursuit of a career in journalism. So thanks, Darren, and thanks, Aysha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to joining you again for another webinar very soon. Thank you for watching. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.